Hey everybody, and welcome once again to Nose in the Book, a Bible reading commentary with me, your host, Pastor Justin Van Reed. Great to have you with me once again today as we take a look at four more chapters from the Word of God. We have before us today Exodus 23, Job 41, John chapter 2, and 2 Corinthians chapter 11. All right, we begin here again, Exodus chapter 23, and we're continuing on with the book of the law and a number of three areas of more laws here. First of all, we have more laws on social justice, and then we have a section on laws on the Sabbath day and other festivals in Israel. And then it closes this section with God's promise of his presence and guidance and victory over their enemies. So in the beginning here, this section on justice, you have some really important principles, I think, that carry over to today. Even though Israel as a society walked by these things, we can adopt some of the principles because God has not changed. And so we see here, for example, he says, you must not follow the crowd in doing wrong. All right, that's a great straight up one right there. Think about something like this, though. If you see that the donkey of someone who hates you has collapsed under its load, do not walk by. Instead, stop and help. Now, later, Jesus is going to say, don't only love those who love you, but love your enemies. Here you see it in the law. This is an example of loving your enemy. You come across your enemy's donkey that's collapsed under its load, help it out. Show your enemy some love here. He talks also about plant and harvest your crops for 6 years, but let the land be renewed and lie uncultivated during the seventh year. Then let the poor among you harvest whatever grows on its own. Leave the rest for wild animals to eat. The same applies to your vineyards and olive groves. So you're not only to think about yourself with your stuff, but to think about others as well. And in particular, the poor are mentioned here. So you just have a number of ways in which, even in the law, though we're reading about specifically how Israel was to conduct itself, you see the heart of God here. Concern for others, concern for the poor, concern for foreigners is mentioned in here, concern for even your enemy. And so again, just this need to show love and justice and compassion to everyone. And then, as I said, there's about the festivals here, and then in the end, this promise of the Lord's presence. And it's, again, parallel in the New Testament. See, I am sending an angel before you to protect you on your journey, lead you safely to the place I have prepared for you. And, God goes on here to talk about his presence with them in the same way the New Testament talks about God's presence with the believers in Jesus and his guiding us and leading us. And so again, there's a difference here because it's specifically for Israel and what they were experiencing. But you see the principles carry over when especially repeated in the New Testament. All right, flipping over then to Job chapter 41. And this whole chapter is about this creature, Leviathan. And it's quite a creature. It's described here. Nothing on earth is its equal. No other creature so fearless. Of all the creatures, it is the proudest. It is the king of beasts. All right, what's going on here? Well, there's really two primary views, I would say. One takes Leviathan as a mythological figure. That, in other words, a lot of Israel's surrounding nations, they would have had these mythological figures that they believed possessed power, were part of creation and creating the world. And what you see, though, in the midst of all that chaos of the nations around them, here's God who is above it and who controls even these so-called mythological creatures. But honestly, when you go through this, the detail is so much here that it sounds as though this Leviathan is actually a real-life animal. And kind of like the behemoth in chapter 40, which, as I said last time, I believe referring to perhaps a dinosaur like a brachiosaur. This Leviathan may have been this significantly large and fearful sea creature, like a sea monster, some kind of sea dinosaur, if you will. And there's various theories about what exactly it could have been or looked like. You get a lot of the description of here of what it looked like, but the point remains that no matter what it is or what it looked like, God is even greater, more powerful. And apparently there was this fear of this Leviathan, and he says, but God says, but nobody can control it. Nobody can tame it. And he says, but I can, right? Because he says, can you catch Leviathan with a hook? Can you put a noose around its jaw? Right? All these rhetorical questions. God's saying, look, I can handle him. I made him. It goes on here about the tremendous strength of Leviathan and just how terrifying he was. Fire coming from his nostril sounds like a dragon of some sort. And yet God is saying, he's nothing to me. I can catch him like a fish in a net. And so just a statement about the power of God. Hey, Job, what do you think of God's power now? All right, turn over to the New Testament, John chapter 2, Gospel of John chapter 2, and a couple things going on here. First of all, the wedding at Cana. This is Jesus' first miracle here. He's at this wedding, and the wine runs out, and so they come, and he says, fill the jars with water, and then take some out and take it to the master of ceremonies. So they do, and the master of ceremonies tasted the water that was now wine, and he calls the bridegroom over. He says, usually you put the best wine out first, then when everyone has had a lot to drink, you bring out the less expensive wine. You've kept the best until now. So not only does Jesus make the water into wine, but he makes the water into really good wine. And so, clearly, if you've ever had good wine, then this is what Jesus was making here at Cana, not just some lousy wine. All right, then after this first miracle, Jesus goes and clears the temple. This is the first time he clears the temple. He's going to do it again at the end of his ministry, in the last week of his life. Here, this is early in his ministry, and he goes in and he chases out the money changers, and he says that his Father's house is not to be a place like a marketplace. It's a, as he'll say elsewhere, it's a place of prayer. And then they say, what are you doing? The Jewish leaders here, first confrontation in the Gospel of John, what are you doing? By what authority do you do this? Show us a sign. Jesus says, destroy this temple, in 3 days I will raise it up. Now, this is significant because as the response is given here, it's taken 46 years to build this temple, and you can rebuild it in 3 days. But John points out that Jesus is talking about his body, that he was going to die and be raised on the third day. And he says when the disciples remembered this statement, and then when they see Jesus raised, that's key to their understanding here, so that they believe both the scriptures and what Jesus had said. So this is a very significant statement here from Jesus' life. It's also what he's going to be accused of saying when he is arrested. Again, misunderstood. He's referring to his body, but and they misquote him slightly. They say Jesus said he's going to destroy the temple, and so, but it's not exactly what he says here. But still, it's a significant statement. All right, then we lastly go to 2 Corinthians chapter 11 here. Paul continuing to defend himself and to defend his ministry, and he talks about these false apostles, so-called super apostles. And see, what was going on in Corinth at the time was you had these traveling teachers, and they're coming to town. And as Paul points out in other places, these guys are really only concerned about money. They're just doing this to so that people will like them. So they might be great, eloquent speakers, and they come and they have this message, and they want people to follow them, and they want people to support their ministry. And so they come with strength, with power, with eloquent words. And Paul's ministry is completely different. He comes with, as he says, weakness and humility. He goes on to describe here his many trials. He says, unlike these super apostles, so-called coming and boasting about themselves so that you will listen to them, and obviously a lot of people were duped into this and did listen to them, Paul says, look, here's what I faced as a follower of Jesus, and he describes all of his sufferings, as being beaten, as being shipwrecked, adrift at sea, on all these journeys in danger from so many people, and besides all that, the daily anxiety he has of his concern for all of the churches. And so this is the mark here, that if I'm going to boast, I want to boast in weakness, because I want God to be the focus, not me. I want God to get the glory, not me. That's a true follower of Jesus, is not there saying, listen to me, listen to how great I am, look at how great I am, look at how powerful I am, but rather, no, I'm nothing. I must decrease, he must increase, he's everything. As he says here, I would rather boast about the things that show how weak I am. And and this is why he comes. He lays it out though. He says, I really want to boast about my weakness because I want to show it's all about God. It's all about what God has done. And so, if you think that that weakness is a sign of the gospel being false, then you've been fooled by these false teachers. All right, that's all we have time for today. Again, Exodus 23 and some laws on social justice and the Sabbath and festivals. We had Job 41 and this wonderful statement about Leviathan and how God is just unstoppable and no limit to his power. We had John chapter 2, the wedding at Cana, and then Jesus clearing the temple, and then the statement about destroy this temple in 3 days I'll raise it. And then 2 Corinthians 11, Paul's trials and suffering and his boasting in weakness. Hope you enjoyed our time together today. Until next time, keep your eyes on the Lord and your nose in the book.